Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Council of the City and County of Swansea. First item on our agenda this evening is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I have apologies from Councillors Andrew Stevens, David Phillips, Louise Gibbard, Linda James and Paxton Hood-Williams.
Presiding Member, can I pass on Sue Jones's apologies? She's had her booster and she's not feeling very well.
Oh, right, okay. Anyone else? No. Hands gone up. Okay, thank you. Item 2, disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. You've all had your regular email from Section Monitoring Officer. Tracy, do you want to add?
Yes, thank you, Presiding Member. Just to remind you, there are 2 pieces of advice tonight in relation to interest. One piece of advice is directed to councillors. The second piece of advice is directed towards any CMT officers who are present in the meeting tonight. In relation to agenda item 12, the inter-authority agreement of the Wales Pension Partnership, there will be some councillors who are members of the pension fund. You will have a personal interest. It is not a prejudicial interest because it is exempted under the code. So if you are a member of the pension fund, you will have a personal interest only. If you have a family member or close personal associate who is also a member of the pension fund, you will similarly have a personal interest only. But again, that will not be prejudicial. I take the view that this is a high-level report, and so that interest will only be personal. So just to remind you, in relation to agenda item 12, you will need to declare a personal interest only if either you are a member of the pension fund yourself or you have a family member or close personal associate who is a member of the pension fund. I will take a block declaration for personal interests only, and I'll do that now before moving on to the officer declarations of interest. So all those who wish to declare a personal interest only in relation to agenda item 12, on the basis of that I've already outlined, can you please raise your virtual hand or your physical hand, or if unable to do both, then please put your interest in the chat.
Can we wait? We've got a number of people who have put their virtual hands up prior to you speaking, so we've got a mix now of people. Can I ask those who are not declaring an interest to take their virtual hand down, please?
So we're just making a note of those who've declared an interest. And can I remind you, councillors, to also make sure you fill in the form.
Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, you?
10 million.
Okay. Those declare the interest on the pension scheme. Now, if you take your hands down, and those wishing to raise other matters, put your hands up. Right, I've got Councillor Gareth Sullivan. Gareth? You're on mute, Gareth.
I wish to declare I'm a member of the Dyfed Pension Fund, soon to become the Carmarthenshire County Fund. And then I was going to declare my daughter as a member of the council, employee of the council.
We'll note that, councillor.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Christine Richards.
Sorry, Chair, I thought I'd put my hand down. I was just declaring a personal interest.
Okay, Councillor Penny Matthews.
Apologies, Des. I can't seem to take the hand down. I do apologise.
Okay. Oh, right, I did have Will Thomas. Will taking his hand down. Right, no one else then.
I one there is Nick Davis.
Councillor Nick Davis.
Sorry, I was a little late joining this item. Declaration of interest. Is it my understanding is that membership of the pension scheme is a block declaration. I don't need to actually make a declaration, do I?
Yes, you are asked to make a declaration under the block declaration.
That's what I'm doing, yes.
Right, and to fill in the relevant form, please.
That's fine, yes, so no problem.
Okay, thank you.
And my second piece of advice is to officers that are in attendance tonight. Obviously, there is a report on the agenda item 8, which relates to the senior management structure. My advice to senior officers will be to declare a personal and prejudicial interest, also remind you to fill in the form and to actually leave the meeting when we come to that agenda item. There are also some public questions relating to that agenda item, so I would suggest that all officers leave at that stage during public questions and remain out of the meeting until such time as you call back in when we move on to agenda item 9. Hugh Evans will be remaining in the meeting to take the minute and also to take the vote. So all those officers that wish to declare an interest, I'm putting up my hand, if they could raise their virtual hands as well, please. Personal and prejudicial interest.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Are there, is any other member feel they need to declare an interest on any other matter on our agenda this evening? No, if not, we'll carry on then. Okay, thank you. Item 3, minutes to approve and the minutes of the previous meetings as a correct record, pages 1 to 6. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, you're happy? Somebody move?
Move, Chair.
Thank you. Seconded. Thank you. Okay, item 4, written responses to questions asked at the last ordinary meeting of council. None. So, and then item 5 under my announcements for this evening. Okay, sadly again, I begin with condolences. It's someone many of us knew personally, and that's former councillor and honorary alderman Sue Waller-Thomas. It's with sadness that I refer to the recent death of former councillor and honorary alderman Sue Waller-Thomas. Susan represented the Newton ward for approximately 25 years, serving on the Swansea City Council from 1986 to 1996 and the sitting county of Swansea from 1995 to 2010. Sue was Lord Mayor in 2007-2008 and a former presiding member of the City and County of Swansea. As I said, many of us knew and worked with Sue, a quiet lady, but effectual all the same. Then I also have to mention another former councillor, Councillor Linda Wixie. Some of you may remember that. I think Linda was West Glamorgan. And again, with sadness, I refer to the recent death of former councillor Linda Wixie. Linda represented Sketty North for approximately 4 years, serving on the West Glamorgan County Council 1990 to 1995. So can I ask you all to sit silently with your cameras as a mark of sympathy and respect. Thank you all. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, something on a lighter note. I'm delighted to announce that the City and County of Swansea Pension Fund has been shortlisted for this year's Local Government Pension Scheme Oscars for 3 awards.
Sorry, start that again. Sorry.
Sorry. Yes. Okay. I'm delighted to announce that the City and County of Swansea Pension Fund has been shortlisted in this year's Local Government Pension Scheme, or Oscars, for 3 awards. The winners will be announced on the 15th of December, and the categories being Pension Fund of the Year, assets less than 2.5 billion, the Best Climate Change Strategy, and the Best Investment Innovation. So good luck to the pension fund. There's a report further on in the agenda on the pension fund this evening. Further good news. Okay, and now again, another good news story. Swansea has become one of the first local authorities in Wales to have developed and implemented its own accredited domestic abuse perpetrator programme. Equilibrium has achieved prestigious accreditation from Respect, a leading national organisation on domestic abuse. It is in line with the Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Act, Wales, that places a duty on the public sector to provide a coordinated response to prevention, protection and support to those affected. To achieve this, the Equilibrium team had to go through an incredibly detailed, nationally recognised quality assurance process that ensures best working practices are evidenced throughout the programme. Swansea now boasts having one of only 4 accredited programmes in Wales and one of only 25 accredited programmes across England and Wales. It is the latest success in the development of a council and partners whose family approach to preventing domestic abuse and supporting survivors. So well done to the domestic abuse team who are working tremendously hard on behalf of everyone in Swansea. That concludes my announcements. Item 6 on our agenda is the leaders' announcements. Call on Councillor Rob Stewart. Rob.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of announcements tonight. Sorry, Chair, can I ask for the mute to get back if that's okay?
Leader, I've had to mute everybody, so you need to unmute yourself, sorry.
Okay, that's not a problem. Thank you very much. First announcement is a positive one. I'm very pleased to announce that Swansea's been successful in attracting the ability to host Ironman 70.3, which will take place on the 7th of August next year. Athletes participating in the Ironman 70.3 Swansea will take on a 1.2 mile, 1.9 kilometre swim in the Prince of Wales Dock before cycling a 1 loop 56 mile bike course. Athletes will cycle through the Mumbles along roads that hug the Gower coastal cliff tops before cycling out to the rural Swansea before heading back along Swansea Bay and into the city. From here on, they will return to Swansea as they prepare to transition into the maritime quarter beside the River Towie. And lastly, athletes will take on a 13.1 mile 2-loop run course, which will take them from the city centre out past the new eye-catching Swansea Arena towards Mumbles before heading back towards the finish line in the marina. And I'm pleased to say Mr. Evans has agreed to take part in the race, and I'll be there to cheer him on. Not as my note says, the leader will be taking part. So, but I'm sure it'll be a great event for Swansea and another boost to the fantastic series of sporting events that we host every year. I'm also pleased to announce, Chair, an increase in funding for us in Swansea. As you know, we are running the biggest recovery fund in Wales, and I'm pleased to announce that due to strengthening financial position of the council, I'm able to announce a further 5 million to be added to that recovery fund this evening. Extra funding within that recovery fund of 1.9 million will be directly focused on our play areas and our playgrounds. Members will know that we're already upgrading over 30 playgrounds across Swansea, and the biggest ever investment of play, over £2 million going in, and that's being led by Councillor Francis Davis and Councillor Stevens. And I know many communities are really pleased already with the new parks and players that they get. But actually, we can go further, and the commitment tonight will mean that every play area in Swansea, in every community, will receive an uplift to ensure that it meets the green level of play standard. So just to be clear, that will mean that where investments have been made, as has happened in certain wards where they haven't completed the playground, we will get in and do the rest of the work. So those would include the play areas not currently in the current 32 programme, but those that will benefit are Gendros Community Centre Playground, Mynydd Newydd Playground, the Pantablawd Road Playground, Bonny Mine Park Playground, Brooksby Road Playground, Bryn Mill Playground, Cumlevel Playground, DFS Playground, Havard Playground, Hale Tirdi Playground, Manselton Playground, Park Llewellyn Playground, Phoenix Centre Playground, the Rees Row Playground, Southend Playground, Tregov Village Playground, Anistawi Playground, Blaen y Maes Playground, Coed Gwilym Playground, Coed Bach Playground, Dunfant Playground, Ganswll Playground, Jersey Park Playground, Trallwyn Playground, Yalton Playground, Hale Frank Playground, Hollet Road Playground, West Cross Woods Playground, Wigvawr Park Playground, Gowerton Playground, all of which will now feel that benefit of that significant investment. On top of this, Chair, we are mindful of the fact that there are a number of skate facilities. I think there are 8 or 9 currently around Swansea, and we will be allocating up to 500,000 to improve skate facilities across Swansea, but also potentially develop new facilities across Swansea as part of the investment in our play areas. So again, representing a significant investment in play and enjoyment across Swansea, which will benefit our well-being. And if I can steal Councillor Christine Richards' term here, delivering on play justice for children. So children across Swansea, in whichever ward they live, will have the benefit of this significant investment. And it gives me great pleasure to have the ability to announce that tonight. And I look forward to the delivery to being taken forward by Councillor Francis Davis and Councillor Andrew Stevens. So thank you all very much for that. Chair, I also have another positive announcement which members will now know about. We said some time ago when the UK government cancelled the original plans for the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon that we would seek to find a way to deliver that scheme. And that represented an effort then funded by the Welsh Government for us to do some regional work with partners to test the international markets, to look at how the financial structure and model for the lagoon could be improved to the degree that it could actually be delivered financially. I was pleased, therefore, to be part of the announcements to confirm that the new proposal, Blue Eden, will go forward. It requires no financial advice from government, either Welsh or UK government, but obviously will require consenting from the relevant governments on elements of the scheme. The new scheme not only has a tidal lagoon wall in it with turbines, as the original proposal did, but then it differs significantly because this proposal is built on revenues from elsewhere, including the delivery of new innovative battery technology plants based in SA1, which is a technology being developed in Wales by the company DST, and they're already building their first plant in West Virginia, where there's some significant hundreds of millions of dollars investment gone into that technology. But their second facility should be here in Swansea, creating thousands of jobs. Those battery plants will be able to store energy from the UK's largest floating solar array, which will be placed within the docks area of SA1, close to the battery plants, and allow then the battery plants to store that energy in a very sustainable way. And that energy will then be used as an uninterrupted power supply for 2 very large data centres measuring over 94,000 square metres, which will be based again near the lagoon footprint. What's clever about this one is, of course, all of these elements are interlinked and support one another because it's very important for data centre operators to have that confidence in power supply, which is uninterrupted. But data centres produce a huge amount of heat, and therefore it's important that that heat isn't lost, but it's used. and therefore the new proposal proposes to take the heat from that data centre and provide it to the housing nearby, allowing some of those houses to have their heating provided for free for an extended period of time. So again, nothing being lost in this, but of course benefits both then for residents in that area, but also a innovative proposal that ensures that no energy and no power is lost from this scheme. So hopefully, all being well, that consortium, international consortium, intend to bring forward the first elements of that scheme from 2023. And again, with COP26 going on this week, it's important that Swansea continues to be at the forefront of efforts to tackle climate change. And of course, I'm grateful to all members of this authority, including fellow leaders who have been supportive of the tidal lagoon proposals over the years. My final announcement tonight, Chair, is just one for information. I just wanted to make clear that I have received advice from the monitoring officer, which I intend to follow. And that advice is that I should not participate in the forthcoming decision on the skate park for Mumbles, because I'm deemed to now potentially have a personal and prejudicial interest. This is because a formal complaint has been submitted from the solicitors acting on behalf of the claimants in the judicial review that was brought against the council. Therefore, I have been advised not to take any part in that decision making at Cabinet. I have to say I'm very frustrated and disappointed at not being able to do so, but I would not wish to put that Cabinet decision at risk by participating in something that could then be deemed to have an interest in. The decision will therefore be taken by my Cabinet colleagues in due course, but as I'm not taking part in the decision, of course, I will now be free to express my personal views on the skate park, and it will come as no surprise to members that I voted for the proposal previously, and I remain predisposed to supporting skate park facilities in Swansea, and that is my position. And I haven't yet seen the new report, and again, I will await that when it comes to Cabinet colleagues, but my predisposed position on this has been that I'm in favour of skate park facilities in Swansea and better facilities for skaters around our county. So I just wanted to put that beyond doubt this evening so that members and the public were clear about why I would not be able to participate in the decision of Cabinet, but also give an indication of my position personally. So thank you for that, Chair, and for the indulgence for those lengthy announcements.
Thank you, Edith. Thank you for that explanation and the previous good news. Councillor Holly has got his hand up. Are you prepared to take a question?
It's not a question, it's just to support obviously the good news about the various other projects, but my disappointment that the leader can't take part in a debate on something which I have to say is, you know, very critical to whether he likes it or not. It's very critical that the leader of council takes part in these debates. I find it quite ironic that he is being picked out of, if you like, for this action, and I feel very disappointed that we as an elected group, the leader of that elected group, cannot take part in this decision. I feel like quite disappointed by that, and I'm sure that all of us elected members, whatever party they belong to, feel the same about that decision.
Thank you for those words, Chris. Yeah, it's somebody playing the political line, the legal line, and you know, if they're able to do it, they're doing it, whether we agree with it or not. But thank you for those words of support to the leader. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, and can I thank Councillor Holly for his words? I do appreciate them greatly.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Okay, on to item 7, public questions. We have a number of public questions. If I can find them. Right, first one is from James McGettrick. And it's on item 15, councillor's question 3. James, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Shall I just ask it?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, relating to that agenda item, would the Cabinet Member for Delivery and Operations be able to rule out new residential development on the home farm site?
Yeah, thanks, James. Thank you for the question. What I would say that at this present time, what we are looking at is many options. There's nothing being totally confirmed yet. Because of COVID, we've not carried out any. And what I would say that at this stage, that I wouldn't rule out anything. I'm not saying that what we're looking for is the best scheme for the city and for the park. So what I would say, let's wait for the public consultation. But at the moment, we are nowhere near doing anything with it, with that particular scheme at present time.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you.
Question 2 is from Neil Jones, and that's on item 12, the amendment to the Inter-Authority Agreement. Neil, ask your question. You with us?
Yeah, I am with you. Yeah, I got a slight problem getting the camera on, so I'll just speak to you. Swansea Council declared, I'm from Swansea Friends of the Earth, by the way. Swansea Council declared a climate emergency in 2019 and have set in motion a strategy to move towards zero carbon in a timely manner, 2030 in the case of its corporate estate. Over the last 3 years, they have reduced their exposure to dangerous fossil fuel investments by nearly 50%. The chairman, Councillor Clive Lloyd, has told us investment in fossil fuels is unsustainable in the long term, and financial advisors, including some of the county's own, have indicated fossil fuel companies like Shell and BP still have no investment strategy compatible with 1.5 degrees, as agreed in Paris 6 years ago. How much longer do we have to wait before the Council and its Pension Fund Committee commits to fossil fuel divestment and develop a strategy for reaching zero carbon in a timely manner in order to protect the future of the planet and the financial security of pension fund members?
Okay, who's taking this?
That'll be me, presiding member.
You taking it, Clive?
Yeah. So yeah, thanks Friends of the Earth and Neil for the question and for submitting it up front. I will provide a written answer, but I'll just cover a few of the salient points that Neil has raised. Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a couple of inaccuracies which I want to clarify in the first instance. You know, paragraph 2, as Neil said, regrettably no similar progress has been made by the Pension Fund Committee, which is a bit disingenuous, but then goes on to say that although over the last 3 years they have reduced their exposure to dangerous fossil fuel investments by nearly 50%. Can I correct Neil and Friends of the Earth on that? It's actually 58%. We had a clear strategy that we agreed in 2017 and as a pension fund committee to reduce our exposure to carbon-based investments by 50% by 2022. We've actually exceeded that well ahead of that timescale, which would be May next year. So we've currently reduced our exposure by 58%, one of the leading pension fund results, not only in Wales, but across the UK. Neil talks about divestment from fossil fuels, fossil fuel companies directly. And that has been a mantra that we've exchanged with friends, or I've exchanged with Friends of the Earth over many years, particularly Mr. Childs, John Childs, who I believe is chair of Friends of the Earth. Listen, we've had a strategy which not only covers the main fossil fuel companies such as BP, Royal Dutch Shell. What we've recognised in our strategy is that all companies, whatever area they participate in, have a carbon footprint. And that goes for companies like Tesla, which are heralded as the new environmentally friendly countries, recently have been criticised for their carbon footprint that they leave in the supply chain to produce these environmentally friendly commodities. So it's imperative that we absolutely look at all our investment companies, all the people that we do business with, to identify not only their direct exposure to carbon-based investments, but their indirect exposure and those of their suppliers as well. And that's what we've been trying to develop, this holistic approach, because, listen, the results speak for themselves. If we'd gone just for a pure divestment of Royal Dutch Shell and BP, we reduced our carbon exposure by 25%. We've over doubled that by taking the approach that we have. We've reduced it by 58%. And not only that, we would have left a black hole because we would not have had the time to do the due diligence on creating those new environmentally friendly investments around infrastructure, housing, renewable energies that we're looking and seeking to do. So where do we go from here? 50% is not enough. If the Friends of the Earth stay around for the report that's coming later in the council agenda, they'll see that we will be looking to take a report to our pension fund committee, which will seek to produce a net zero carbon investment strategy for the Swansea Pension Fund by 2037. That is a decision for the pension fund committee and not council, and that will be debated at the meeting in a week's time. But we have firm proposals on that, and it's my ambition as the chair of the pension fund to ensure that we do have that net zero investment strategy in place by 2037 at the very latest, which is 3 terms from 2022. So I hope I've covered all the aspects and the reasons why we take the approach that we do. We look at it holistically, and we try and reduce the carbon footprint of all the people that we engage with, not just directly with the likes of Royal Dutch Shell and BP. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Aldrich Parrott, question 3.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My questions are on, you've got prior sight of them, and you've also got a little bit of context. They're on items 17, 11, and 8, and they're paired up on each one. So there's 2 questions on each 17, 2 on 11, and 2 on 8. So I'll just go straight through, Chair, with your permission, and I'll just go through black letter recital of the questions. Here they come. Item 17, the question 1 is, what actual allocation of resource or quantum of finance is anticipated to be deployed as a consequence of the notice of motion, if it's passed this evening, to satisfy the terms of the motion? I'll give you a little bit of context on that regarding your biodiversity duties, your statutory duties, but I won't recite that now. Question 2, which relates to item 17, on the principle of what gets measured gets fixed, would the council say and describe what, if any, work has been undertaken to enlist, engage, and participate in the either in international or national nature-based or sustainable city comparators? The 2 I gave as exemplars would be National Park City Foundation and the Global Destination Sustainability Index. That latter one, Glasgow, has gone up from 7th to 4th. The 2 financial ones, which is item 11, Treasury Management Strategy. There's a specific guidance from the Welsh Government, I'll just quote that. Local authorities should disclose to what extent investment decisions consider long-term climate risks to support a low carbon economy. Obviously, you just had a little snippet of that regarding the pension, but this is wider now regarding the whole finance of the authority. So the 2 consequent questions on item 11 would be, would the council state in summary what actions, measures have been considered and undertaken in terms of treasury management to comply with Welsh Government guidance as reduced above, as I just quoted to you regarding the investment statutory guidance. Now, question 4 is, would the council say, in terms of the SIPFA advice, which SIPFA gets a lot of mentions whenever I call in, public finance, they basically prefer to see a director of finance rather than the current CCS Section 151 arrangements. So what does the council understand as the reasons for the SIPFA suggestion and why the new proposed structure will add value? Obviously, this is under item 8, which I'm going to come straight on to now. What were the terms of reference to the WLGA and by the report author, who was the next chief executive? And would the council undertake to publish both the terms and the report which informs the restructuring of the staff structure? Final question, question 6. What was the mischief identified in the current structure that the restructuring is meant to remedy? And further say if and to what extent the advent of GPOC, which is the new right to trade, gives a general power of competence in the restructuring exercise, and the new requirements on councils to act collaboratively and be more open and transparent in their ESG, economic, social and governance activities. That's now got force of EU law if we were still members of the EU, but we're not. So I'll leave you with those, presiding officer.
Thank you, Nutridge. Right, have we got the order of those? Leader, are you going to?
Chair, I was just going to say, firstly, I think Mr. Smith will pick up some of those questions because they are quite long and technical. But again, obviously, not that I would wish to deprive Mr. Pero of obviously asking those questions at full council like he does, but they are lengthy technical questions, and he doesn't have to wait for a full council to have the answers on those. If he could write to us at any time, and we'd be more than happy to respond as quickly as possible so that we could give him those answers. But obviously his right is to ask them here. But questions of that nature, which are quite detailed and quite technical, can be dealt with much more efficiently, probably via an email. And again, you know, just urge Mr. Pero to take advantage of that, especially when the questions are long and comprehensive. But I'll hand over to Mr. Smith now, who can pick up some of those questions, and I think the chief exec will pick up some of the others.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Member. As the Leader has indicated, I will respond to the first 3 questions, and then, as indicated with my personal and prejudicial interest, I will then immediately leave the meeting and others will answer the remaining questions. So in terms of the 3 asked that I can seek to answer, Mr. Perrott, and again, my thanks for giving advance sight of them as ever. In terms of the quantum of finance on the notice of motion, no resources are allocated directly by the notice of motion itself. This is normal practice for notices of motion. That will be a matter for the budget build and council approval next March for 2022-23 and beyond, the medium-term plan and the longer-term aspirations of council. It will undoubtedly require funding from UK and Welsh Government to help the council facilitate the seismic step change needed by us all to address the concerns facing the whole planet. Existing budgets, primarily within the Place Directorate, provide for some aspects of the concerns expressed within the motion as part of our duty to the well-being of future generations, to nature, to biodiversity, to flood alleviation, etc. In addition, the Council maximises the opportunity for grant applications to support the current work programme, and it is expected that this will continue in the years to come. In terms of the second question around what gets measured, the Council is committed to the One Planet standard, which aligns to the future generations' requirements and objectives. The Council will explore such other opportunities that align to its objectives following the decision on the notice of motion on this agenda today. In terms of the specific one on Treasury Management, the first one only that I can answer, and then I'll defer to others having left the meeting. The Treasury Management strategy itself is focused only on borrowing and short-term deposit of cash funds. As approved investments, they have to be with authorised sterling deposit-taking institutions and are not in themselves investments per se as referenced in that statutory guidance. In fact, regulations over the restriction on local authority Treasury Management activity have primacy on that matter. Having said that, the market is evolving quickly in this space, and an approved deposit taker has recently set up a sustainable reserve account to which we have recently allocated some of our surplus cash. This fund aims to support and lend to businesses, supporting and promoting a transition to a sustainable low carbon future. The borrowing itself has, of course, facilitated the substantial capital programme for both the Housing Revenue Account and General Fund, which includes a range of investment decisions related to the capital strategy and the priorities of the Council. These decisions include the construction of energy efficient council homes, the decarbonisation of the existing housing stock, the introduction of renewables and energy efficient improvements on our widening building stock, investment in improved flood defence works, and the purchasing of significant EV vehicles. And at that point, I will hand over to others and leave the meeting as previously disclosed, presiding member, with your permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Presiding member, if Mr. Evans could give me an indication when the senior officers have left, I'll start then, yeah?
They have all left.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Parrott, for your questions, and thank you for the advanced sight of them. The first question on SIPFA may be better aimed at them, but in short, I'll try and give you our interpretation, which is, I think, what you were actually asking for. And we think the SIPFA rationale, which is set out quite clearly in the statement, which applies to all local authorities, reinforced further now by Compulsory Financial Management Code for 21-22. And I'll quote what SIPFA say. The governance requirements in the statement are that the Chief Finance Officer should firstly be professionally qualified, report directly to the Chief Executive, and be a member of the leadership team with a status at least equivalent to other members. Personally, the view is this appears to be primarily driven to ensure direct access to the CEO and independence from the rest of the management structure at all times. The proposals in the report will enable the council to comply directly with that code and no longer require formal disclosure of departure from the code. And as we move into an era of increased regional collaboration, this also puts Swansea in the same footing as our 3 regional partners, where Section 151 officer role is a director reporting directly to the Chief Executive Officer. In respect of the WLGA report, the requested report includes both personal sensitive information of staff together with management forecasting, and both elements are sensitive and not suitable for disclosure. This is particularly the case as affected staff are subject to a period of statutory consultation regarding the restructure. The report before Council addressed all the elements that is appropriate to share in a public forum without impacting directly on the privacy rights of the individuals affected or impacting on the business need to plan resources. In respect to your final question, Mr. Parrott, there's no mischief as such that's meant to be remedied here. I do think your question on the general power of competence is an interesting one. The alignment and stronger accountability of commercial functions of the council with its core financial decisions, and that's not just revenue decisions, that's capital and revenue decisions, will ensure that the authority is quite well placed to ensure the proper and effective use of the general power of competence. And I think puts finance at the heart and commercialism at the heart, so that every decision that council takes is taken with the best possible advice right at the centre. And I think it does relate to the ESG responsibilities as you've referred to. So thank you very much for your questions, Mr. Parrott. That's all I have to say, presiding member. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Okay, Leader, do you want to come back in?
Sorry, Chair, nothing further to add from me. If there are any further points, I'll pick them up as a written response to Mr. Parrott.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, that moves us on then to item 8, senior management structure. And this is going to be given by the Chief Exec, Mr. Phil Roberts. All of the other officers who declared an interest have left the meeting. So, Mr. Roberts, please.
Thank you very much, presiding member. The current management structure has been successful in steering the council through and the city through the pandemic, but some changes are now needed so we can meet the next set of challenges we face. And I'd ask tonight, presiding member, that it's put on record that, like all staff and elected members, the directors, chief officers and heads of service have worked tirelessly for the last 18 months, and their collective efforts to support the city and its communities deserve recognition. Whilst immediate changes are required, these should be kept to a minimum, given that there'll be a new council following the elections in May next year, and I'll be retiring just prior to that date. And this will allow latitude for the new council and the new chief executive to make further changes during the next council term. The simple truth is that we've managed the pandemic with an unchanged structure, but as we shift to recovery, the volume of work and money involved is of a different order. We've managed major increases in capital and revenue expenditure. Fortunately, this has been recognised by Welsh Government and reflected in our budget settlements, which allows for an appropriate and budgeted for increase in resources. The proposals in front of you will consolidate our progress in social services and health integration, which has been essential during the pandemic and been given a real turbocharge. They'll give us a capacity to deliver our agenda for vulnerable learners, but also ensure that the finance function, as you just heard in response to Mr. Perrott's questions, is sufficiently robust to face the impending challenges that we predict ahead. It's also important that we commission a review of pay and grading for senior staff, as the existing system is outdated and becoming unfit for purpose. It hasn't been reviewed for some years, and it will cause inequalities between staff unless it is reviewed. So during the process of writing the report, I've spoken to all involved, and as you've heard, accessed advice directly from the Welsh Local Government Association, and the specific proposals are contained in the body of my report, but for clarity, they're as follows. First is the deletion of the post of Chief Finance Officer, the creation of an additional post, Director of Finance, which is accountable for all finance functions and commercialism, including the Section 151 officer duty, the deletion of the Chief Transformation Officer post and the creation of a new post of Head of Digital and Customer Services, the redesignation of the Deputy Chief Executive Director of Resources to Deputy Chief Executive Director of Corporate Services, the formalisation and recruitment of the Head of Service for HR and Service Centre through the merger of the two service areas, the creation of the post of Head of Vulnerable Learner Services in the Education Directorate in order to help us deliver on the extensive ALN agenda that was given to us by Welsh Government through the ALN Act, consolidation of the current interim structure in adult services and the posts of Head of Adult Services and the post of Integrated Services. I'm also seeking that you decide to appoint an interim chief executive with an appropriate period of handover built in, pending the appointment of a substantive chief executive by the next council. And finally, this commissioning of a pay and grading review for senior officers. The net additional cost of proposals is £182,516, and Appendix 3 details the financial implications. As I said earlier, these costs have been anticipated and budgeted for. If Council agrees these recommendations, then the next step will be a 30-day consultation period that will take place with all affected staff. This report treads quite a fine balance between dealing with some urgent and pressing issues while allowing flexibility for the next Council and for the next Chief Executive Officer to make any further changes that become necessary. Presiding Member, I ask that Council consider and approve the recommendations on page 1 of my report. Thanks very much, Presiding Member.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Leader, Councillor Rob Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just coming in to formally move the report on behalf of the Chief Executive, but also to support the recommendations. I would just add to what the Chief Executive said and reinforce a few points. One, again, we pay tribute to staff at all levels, including at the most senior level, for the way in which they've responded to the pandemic and the way in which they've assisted in delivering all of those additional urgent things that we've been required to do as a council during.
Leader, you're muted. Sorry, you've just gone into mute for some reason.
Sorry. So as I was saying, in terms of the additional responsibilities that have fallen upon the senior management team and all staff at all levels during the past 18 months. As the Chief Executive has said, there is a temporary increase in the costs of the senior management team, but the approach being taken is one of pragmatism, is ensure that we bolster the senior management team in those areas that require it, especially in the areas the Chief Executive has outlined. But it also means that when the next Chief Executive is appointed, together with the next council that is elected, then determination can be made on the full and final structure of the senior management team, which obviously will need to match the ambitions and priorities of the next administration. So for those reasons, Chair, it is a logical way of approaching that. And the obvious increase that's there temporarily is required to ensure stability and that we have the right people with the right skills in the right places to get us through the next phase of this pandemic and into the next term of council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Can I have somebody who formally seconded before I call on Councillor Chris Holly?
Happy to formally second, Presiding Member.
Thank you. Councillor Holly.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I concur with the leader about the way in which our staff, both at senior level and right down to the very lowest member, or not the lowest is the wrong way to put it, but all our staff need to be applauded for the work they carried out through the pandemic and carried on since then. I would reinforce what the Chief Executive is saying about the fact that the financial position of the 151 officer and a director of finance is going to be incredibly important in the near future, as what he has said, the way in which we no idea what the budgets are going to bring up. So I think I totally agree with that aspect of it, and I fully support the report.
Thank you, Chris. I've got Councillor Peter Black. Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support the thrust of the report. I have, however, got 3 questions, if that's possible, which hope the Chief Executive is able to answer. The first one, in the consultant's report, there is reference to needing some clarification on where the responsibility for NEETs will lie, but that isn't addressed in the report which is in front of Council. So I'm just wondering if that could have some clarification on that in terms of the structure which we're considering today. Secondly, there is also a recommendation in the original report to establish a chief operating officer, which isn't being taken forward. So again, I'd just like an explanation as to why that's not being taken forward. And finally, the original report also refers to the need to consider a separate planning and regeneration function, so as to provide an unencumbered window for people who want to invest in the city. And again, that hasn't been taken forward here. So really, I'd like some information as to why that is the case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Chief Executive, you're on mute.
Apologies. Thank you, Councillor Black, and thank you for your questions. The issue of NEETs is a truly corporate one, and the answer to your question is the lead needs to be taken either at Chief Executive or Deputy Chief Executive level. So my intention will be to embed the whole principle of NEET, because it crosses so many corporate boundaries, in the responsibilities of the Deputy Chief Executive Officer. So that would be my preference. Clearly, there's a consultation process going on at the moment, so I wouldn't wish to preempt that particular one. On the Chief Operating Officer, we did, as you'll probably remember, Councillor Black, have a Chief Operating Officer some years ago. I've taken the view that we don't progress that at this point in time, because we don't know what's actually going to happen next in respect of the interim Chief Executive. Now, you'll see from the report, there is the suggestion that the post be advertised and ring fenced to the existing directors in accordance with legal advice that I've had, and subject to which director gets that post, other changes will then be necessary within the structure. And I'm not preempting those changes, but what it will mean, Councillor, as you probably already worked out, that there will be a further report needed to be brought back around the senior management structure on that very point. And the same thing really applies to the latter question that you've got. At the moment, there's the planning and regeneration functions are working perfectly effectively together. My view was that that is not an urgent matter and is a matter that can be taken in due consideration by the new council at the appropriate time. There is nothing broken to fix in that particular thing, but I think it will come back, Councillor, when the new council considers its priorities, and it may well wish to consider that question. I'm doing what's absolutely urgent and required now, without trying to fetter the flexibility and freedom of future democratic process and the Chief Executive's view, which will inform that at the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Presiding Member.
Okay, thank you. Right, the report and the recommendations on page 7 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Evans, will you take the vote, please?
Yeah, one moment. So this, yeah, the vote has been launched. You should receive it. I'll give you a moment or two to cast your vote. And as usual, for those of you who have not received it, please raise your virtual hand and I will take a verbal vote. So has anybody not received it? If you can raise your virtual hand, I shall start with those people. No, it appears everybody has received. Oh, sorry, you are Councillor Fiona Gordon.
Hi, I think I received it and I think I voted for, but if you could just check, if not, vote for, please.
Okay. Oh, there's more coming in now. Councillor Peter Jones.
You're on mute.
Councillor Peter Jones. No. Okay. Councillor Gordon Walker. Councillor Walker.
You're on mute, are you, Gordon?
No. You're muted, Councillor Walker. No, no vote. Okay. I shall. So I've had no votes there from Councillor Peter Jones or Councillor Gordon Walker. Do you wish to vote now or not? Councillor Walker.
Chair, my vote is for the recommendation.
Councillor Walker,
with difficulty unmuting.
Oh, Councillor Jones. How were you voting, Councillor Jones?
For the recommendation.
And Councillor Walker?
For.
Okay, I'll just close the poll for everyone else. Give me a moment. Apologies for this slight delay, and that's unanimous for the report. Thank you very much. If you could just give me a moment while I invite people back in. Give me 1 second. I'll call. I have a few more to call in as well.
Go do it physically.
There you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, item 9 is the update on the Children and Young People's Rights Scheme, and that's on page 114, and it's Councillor Elliot King. Elliot?
Yeah, thank you, presiding member. So the report you have before you today represents work that's taken place over the past 18 months to update our Children and Young People's Rights Scheme. The original scheme having been put into place back in 2014, which followed the motion to council at that in 2013 to embed the UNCRC within council policy. So this version before you today has been co-designed with children, young people, families, members of the public and members of the Children's Rights Network, and is incorporating the Children's Commissioner for Wales the Right Way approach, which sets out 5 key principles through which we are aiming to embed the UNCRC in all of the council's decision making. And under each of the 5 key principles, we've set out the actions required to embed the children's rights within our policy, strategies and services. And as part of this, we will plan to monitor and evaluate the progress against each of these actions. And this has been described in the report in the more simplified plan on a page, which has been co-designed with children and young people to be something that is more understandable and readable. So the report firstly requests Council to support this approach and noting the results of the consultation and then approving our plan on the page. You also note in the recommendations at Council have been asked to support the establishment of 6 co-production forums, which will work with children and young people. And these are really based on themes that have been identified as priorities from children and young people as part of the consultation. And the hope is to continue to carry on these conversations and to develop this forum model as we move forward. The 6 themes identified, as I said, are based on that feedback and the key issues that children and young people wanted to work on to make Swansea a better place. And they will be developed alongside officers, members, councillors, council champions to align with current work being planned to bring the voices and involvement of children and young people into decision makers. The 6 areas that have been identified are protecting the environment and green spaces, to link in with the work being undertaken within the climate change agenda, the quiet voices area, which is developing ways to listen to children and young people who perhaps always don't wish to speak up, but also making sure that we're capturing voices of underrepresented groups such as BME, supporting disabled children, equality for LGBTQ+ children and young people, politics, which is around developing resources for children and young people to understand perhaps what politics is, what the council does, and there's a clear linking in with the theme around encouraging voting at 16 and registration to vote and how we can improve that. And finally, listening to learners, which is strengthening the collective pupil voice across the county. So it means that working co-productively, there may be other themes that emerge from children and young people, and there's been some recent examples of that. So there's been expression to look at women's safety in public areas, which children have identified following the tragic Sarah Everard case, but also looking at what a human rights approach means for children and young people in the context of the Human Rights City work. Sadly, we can't have a big event to launch the plan, but we are planning to launch it in the week leading up to the 20th of November, which is the Universal Children's Rights Day. And if the plan is approved, we will be providing schools and organisations across Swansea with a pack explaining the scheme with posters and details of how to become involved and inviting interest on that. Finally, really, I just want to thank the officers who've undertaken a lot of work in producing this consultation and the revised plan, and which we have before us today. And I'd like to formally move the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kerry Evans. Kerry?
Yes, thank you, Presiding Member. Can I formally second this report, please? I'm particularly pleased to see the concentration on co-production in addressing the 6 key issues that children and young people have identified in the consultation, and also very pleased to see a focus on increasing children and young people's understanding of politics locally, and for developing mechanisms for greater connection between us as members and children and young people in the community. And finally, I'd just like to commend the work of the Partnership and Involvement team, both on this report and the consultation, and also the excellent work that they've been doing since 2014. So just like to formally second the report.
Thank you, Kerry. Councillor Christine Richards.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I too would like to thank all of those who've been involved with children's rights and those who helped bring this report to Council today. I believe it's something that Swansea should be very proud of. Wales and Swansea have both shown for many years that we have taken the rights of children and young people very seriously. I mean, in 2001, Wales appointed its first Children's Commissioner. In 2011, Wales became the first country in the UK to make the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child part of its domestic law. And as Elliot has already said, on 20th of November 2014, City and County of Swansea adopted its own children's rights scheme, giving ourselves the duty, in a nutshell, to consider the impact on children and young people on basically everything we said and everything we did. We encouraged our schools to sign up to become rights respecting schools, and eventually they all did. We made a real effort to listen to our children and young people and consult them on matters that affected them. Any of us who have asked the opinions of children and young people might, as I have, been astonished and delighted at their consideration and their thought. And Elliot has already given examples of the 6 areas that they want to talk about, and an additional 2. I'm certainly not going to go through lists of examples where I've been like surprised, delighted, and quite overwhelmed at some of the things our youngsters come up with. In 2021 now, we have a revised, updated children's rights scheme which reflects the priorities set by our young people, and I think that's extremely important. We've also got in the curriculum now a rights-based approach, which is something again that I'm very pleased about. I'd just like to say, for all those who've helped promote the 42 articles contained in the UNCRC, for all those who've listened to our children, for all councillor colleagues who've taken their role as corporate parents and nanas and grandpas very seriously, to Dilly the Dragon, who represents Swansea doing it the right way, to all those who have contributed to our children's rights quilt and continue to make sure that Swansea keeps the faith. It's something that Michael Sheen said when we had that lovely launch back in 2015. I've tried my best to keep the faith. Swansea is doing its best to keep the faith. And I'm delighted to see that this will ensure that Swansea keeps working the right way. And congratulations on the event on the 20th of November, Elliot, as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Councillor Peter Black.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first of all thank the officers and the Cabinet member for what is actually an excellent report and clearly a very clear way forward in terms of actually engaging children and young people for the future. I think Elliot will recall back in March in these the Scrutiny Programme Committee that we discussed how we were going to engage young people in terms of the day-to-day running of the council and development of policies. And I think we were concerned that this could quite easily degenerate into a tick box exercise. So I'm just wondering, clearly there are issues in terms of the... I'm getting feedback of some sort. Yeah, so clearly in the report itself there are some mechanisms put in there, but how do we make sure how are we monitoring that to make sure that doesn't just become a tick box exercise, which sometimes these things can become. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Elliot, do you want to take that now, or do you want? I got another two speakers.
I'm happy to take it at the end, presiding member.
Thank you, Councillor Mike Day.
Thank you, presiding member, and I can't really follow Christine Richards' impassioned outline of the importance of this particular area, and totally support what's been suggested and put before us today. I think it's fantastic that we have the involvement of the young people, and many people would actually say that they're the future generation. Well, they're not. They're with us now, and we need to ensure that we involve them in matters which affect all of us. And I think those of us who are involved with children and young people in terms of their education, engagement in life, etc., do have that particular perspective of wanting to make sure that children are involved. So I particularly welcome the co-production engagement process which has been used so far and which will be used in future. Just one, I suppose, very practical and in one sense of a minor point, and that is in connection with the composition of the forums. Clearly, we want to engage as wide a group as possible, but which would also involve councillors from across the chamber, if I can still call us across the chamber, as it were. It's a question of being able to make sure that these forums are going to be effective and constructive. So I wondered whether the Cabinet member has any views at the moment as to how these forums might look. I know that he talks in the report about invitations being initially extended for people to join up with the forums, but is there a way of ensuring that there is the right balance of young people not to be overwhelmed by adults, and also to ensure that every party across the council is represented in these very important matters?
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Councillor Bridget Rowlands. Bridget?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that having read the report, fully support it, and can see absolute benefits for the children and young people of Swansea within this report. I'd just like to say that we really need to implement this in decisions that are made by Cabinet and Council, because unless we implement those, it's absolutely pointless as pushing this through Council. So I just wanted to say that really, because when the closures of Craigheaven Park and Velindre School were made, I don't believe that the UNCRC was really implemented in that decision. So let's make changes and let's push this forward and make sure that our young people and children of Swansea are listened to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bridget. Elliot, do you want to come back? Any responses?
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member. First of all, can I thank Councillor Richards for the comments, and I also to thank her for her work that she's done in this area, and I know it's been a passion for her to take that forward, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to pick that up from her, you know, and develop that work. So I think we all owe her great thanks for her vision with that. Just to answer Councillor Black's comment, and I think it's a really important one. We have to make sure this is not a tick box exercise, and that we actually take this forward. And that's why I'm pleased that we've had the report today, and that outlines a way forward. It's going to be a journey for us as we look at this forum model and evaluate how that feeds into the wider council decision policy making. And I suppose that links really into Councillor Day's question around the composition. I think that's still something that we need to look at and decide how we are going to implement that. I'm really keen that councillors get opportunity to be involved in these forums. I think that's really important, because I think young people need to have access to councillors, and that needs to be facilitated in a way that, as you mentioned, Councillor Day, is not an overwhelming experience for them. And I know our participation team, who are going to be helping to develop these, are very experienced and skilled in undertaking that work. We have had some trial runs, so you know, with the recruitment of the new head of service for child and family services, also the director of education, children, young people were involved in that recruitment, and they were recruited from our existing participation. But I think I thank you for the comments. I think there is a journey to be made, and I'm hoping that that as we start that, we will get to a position where we have something that works well and is not just a tick box. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Elliot. We've got a late starter, Councillor Mike Dirk. Mike.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Yes, thanks, Elliot. I couldn't support this more. I applaud Christine's passion and everyone else's. I just wanted to allude to one comment in the report. One of the comments says, make sure children are not picked twice until every child in their class is picked once. You know, and I like that. It's about spreading it. It's not just having a forum with the great and the good. I didn't like them when I was in school because I was never one of them, you know. And it's about spreading it more and more. And as Elliot said in the report, it's about spreading an awareness of citizenship and politics and looking for the quiet children. And in the report, there's mention of suggestion boxes and developing the art of listening in social services, in education, and most importantly, as Christine said, at home, and changing the culture of childhood. Hillary Clinton, many years ago, when she was a young woman, spoke about children's rights being a slogan in search of a definition. Well, Swansea Council, everyone involved should be proud, because it's not now. This is at the vanguard, I think, and well done, everyone.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, that was, I don't think there was a question there as such, Elliot. Okay, the report has been moved and seconded. The recommendations are on page 114. Mr. Evans, take the vote, please.
Okay, the vote has been launched. I'll give you all a moment or two to submit your votes, and then I'll, for those of you who don't receive it, you could raise your virtual hands and I will call you. Who do I have? Councillor Gordon Walker.
For.
Peter Jones.
For, Chair.
Any others? No? Okay, I shall close the poll. Give me a moment. And again, I can see that vote is unanimous for, Chair.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Evans. Okay, item 10 then, we've got a verbal report on the midterm budget statement 2021/22 from the section 151 officer, Mr. Ben Smith. Ben, please.
Thank you, presiding member. Yes, as you say, this is a verbal update which has become a routine occurrence given the timing of things. And unusually for me, I've got a script today. I normally speak off the cuff, but so it might be a little bit more stilted, and it will probably be a little bit over the 10 minutes. So I hope I can have your indulgence. So without further ado, I shall crack on. In terms of my statement to you, I looked back at what I said last year, first of all, and it proved remarkably prescient, albeit a bit out on the timing. Public sector real terms cuts and tax rises by mid-decade is what I said last year. Well, they will come earlier. Some already have, and some are built into the pipeline. Fiscal drag, those frozen tax allowances, the new national insurance contribution for employer social care levy, inflation rising on such matters as food, petrol, gas and electricity, supply shocks, what I call a lopsided labour market, public sector pay pauses, future likely real terms pay stagnation for most sectors are all combining to make the outlook gloomier faster. Much of this is or will be upon our doorstep as a council, trying to procure and provide services and retain staff in vital roles and manage our own budgets and priorities. Though short term, there is likely to be plenty of cash to mask the pain. I repeat what representatives from SIPFA have said, that for local government, much better than expected, but not as much as needed. And from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, adjusting for that social care levy, funding for local government is lower than the average department, and some cuts to services are still likely, and council tax will have to take the strain in some of those future years after the front-loaded grant increase is then frozen. Of course, both those statements need to ultimately be translated in due course into a Welsh Government funding context. This should come as no surprise because, as I said last year, the costs of the pandemic have to be repaid, and no one, not even UK or Welsh Government, can magic free money out of fresh air. Time can be bought to bring short-term assurance and stability. We are seeing elements of that unravel rather faster than myself and others expected over the medium term. That sounds utterly imbued with politics, and as you know, I am not allowed to be political, I must be apolitical. But I see it rather more as a statement of the obvious and the facts as I see them, which will have political consequences. These national issues and debates, and some might say convulsions, will ultimately manifest themselves locally in our own decisions, our decision-making and risk-taking. Councillors do not want to cut services or cut real pay or have significant council tax increases, whatever their political colours. Yet national policy decisions and spending allocations and the wider economic reality of the speed or otherwise of recovery, the acceleration or otherwise of inflation, and the speed of interest rate rises or otherwise often force our hand. We are not an island within an island. Turning to the National Budget and Comprehensive Spending Review headlines from last week, first the headline positives. Everyone gets more cash in cash terms and pretty much short term, most in real terms. Some are pretty meaty, including local government in England, to be fair, and equally the Welsh Government. Though, as has been since noted by the Institute for Fiscal Studies and others, much of the local government increase is as expected as a result of that social care levy, so it's money to fund those new burdens. Nevertheless, it would be remiss of me not to note that how pleasant the immediate headlines were, despite the inevitable devil in the detail to follow. The same is true of Welsh Government funding in the short term, at least, with significant cash and real terms increases, heavily front-loaded for 22-23, then petering out somewhat. The assumptions for the public sector funding longer term remain bleaker. The Welsh Government will have choices to make come December, and I do not think they will all be easy ones, especially when viewed over the medium term compared to the relatively easier short-term choices. There will be competing clarion calls for the deserving, and medium-term choices will have to be made. My reading of the headlines and what's to come are as follows. As ever, devil in detail to come when we get the settlement towards the end of December. There is a certainty of a 3-year spending review for Wales and a deal for Wales, and thus potentially for local government in Wales. it might make the medium-term financial planning assumptions rather more firm than has been the case over the last decade. The welcome front-loading of most of the increases mean that 22-23 should be a bumper feast, followed by little, then perhaps a little bit of famine in real terms. Those real terms increases may be 7%, virtually nothing, and then slightly minus. Much depends, of course, on one's assumptions over inflation and perhaps most pertinently inflation expectations, as well as the degree of economic growth rebounding over the midterm or not. If current inflation spikes prove to be an aberration and settle down more rapidly and the economy continues to rebound, then there are real terms increases over and beyond 22-23. But if they persist and economic growth falters, then the gloomier assessment I started with may be much more apt. There will be much higher prices, with some return to trend probably later than previously expected. I can see headline consumer price inflation of 5% this year, then 4% next, then 3%, then 2%. Higher wages, including in the public sector, where the freeze has nominally gone, that will likely still fail to keep pace with real terms throughout. That may ultimately impact our service delivery if we can't compete in what I refer to as a lopsided labour market. The personal tax burden is increasing through those stealth erosion and new taxes, the national insurance contributions and frozen allowances. Employers face tax increases through the NIC and social care levy. The ongoing temporary set of reductions in business rates will reduce redistributed business rates to all councils. We are, of course, yet to see what will happen with the Welsh Government equivalent, but I expect it to be at least equal, and I look forward to being recompensed in due course for the full value of that. But at some point, the national pool will need some recalibration and those deficits addressed, and rating revaluation of the high street is unlikely to help the problem. So, given that local government gets 100% of the national pool and the national pool will ultimately be in some difficulty, that can mean only one thing. That longer term reform of non-domestic rates looks harder than ever before. Having focused on the gloom, which is partly what I'm here to do, to say what I think might happen, it's equally important I reflect and reassure about the short term. There must be a very significant cash increase coming to local government for 22-23, given those comprehensive spending review announcements and the front loading. In fact, I've even written my expectations down, but I've locked them safely away in a drawer because I can't make those policy decisions and the numbers are pretty darn big. I nearly ran out of fingers and toes this year, so we'll have to see what actually happens. Time will tell whether I'm accurate or way off the mark. I do hope my optimism is not misplaced, and I hope and think that 22-23 will be relatively straightforward. Certainly Wales Fiscal Analysis out of Cardiff University have very similar expectations. Having focused on what others may yet do unto us with our settlement, we have many things that control our own destiny. We have had 2 years of substantial underspending of £17 million and over £50 million added to our cash-backed reserves. Budget monitoring for the first quarter indicated the budget remained balanced for the current year, and we expect it to get better in quarter 2 and quarter 3, as the leader referenced earlier. We have already set aside and started spending the £20 million recovery fund, which again the leader referenced earlier. He is intending to expand upon further. This is not a council asking others for money on this matter, it's spending its own, or perhaps more accurately providing a rapid dividend back to the local residents, service users and taxpayers from those past areas of underspending. That will undoubtedly help the local economy and boost services. Taken with our prudent approach to known future capital financing costs already built into the medium term, our bolstering of reserves to meet known and anticipated future obligations, and setting aside money in the better times as well as in the height of the COVID storm, we can weather the short term more easily than many councils in Wales and the wider UK. Our pension fund has had a stellar few years and at present is fully funded, which may yet further reduce pressures in later years if this holds at the next triennial revaluation in 2022. There will be more on this from Councillor Lloyd on the agenda in due course. I have, as you will see elsewhere on this agenda, also externalised all planned borrowing for the general fund at the lowest rates ever achieved by this council, providing certainty for up to 50 years, and this de-risks the future and ultimately should reduce the medium-term peak of those capital financing costs. As you come to consider the budget in March, you will need to weigh up the medium and long-term obligations to future generations, to the economy, to the planet, as well as the likely relatively easy task in front of you for 22-23 alone. You will also want to make sure that you don't add to local economic pressures and experiences by impacting services or loading council tax any more than you have to, as COVID and economic uncertainties remain in the short term. You do, as members, face likely continued hard choices, especially after 22-23, and I still don't envy you those choices that you face over the medium term. But for the avoidance of doubt, and at risk of slightly getting ahead of myself, before we know the December settlement, I am certain I will be advising that there will be net cash investment available to revenue budgets, not only next year, but all future years of the MTFP when it is refreshed. That will be subject to any recommendations Cabinet may make to Council before Council decides in March. The issue very much is like the national debate over the comprehensive spending review and the Chancellor's budget, which will be whether those headline increases in cash feel quite so real for the country, the council, households and individuals when inflation, interest rates, taxation, demography, social care funding changes and those future funding obligations under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and especially climate action are factored in, especially so over the medium term. In conclusion, and to draw it to a close, I will in the meantime do my best to give you the best advice I can for the now and remind you of your obligations for the future. I am concerned about the longer term, but I am satisfied that you remain in a very, very good place in the short term. And I'd rather be in that place than where some of my colleague councils, particularly in England, are. So thank you for listening to me speak. I probably have gone over the 10 minutes, so apologies for that, presiding member. And at that point, I will pause and take questions on a technical matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. As I'm sure you all know the process now. Are there any technical questions to the Section 151 officer? No, if not, we go on to the Leader of the Council and Councillor Rob Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first commend Mr. Smith for an excellent update, which he has again made a very complex subject of local government financing, as well as funding from both governments, a much more understandable topic and digestible, so that those sitting in the chamber virtually and also watching from home can have some takeaways from. I think, as Mr. Smith outlined, whilst there are some troubling times ahead in terms of the way in which the three-year comprehensive spending review has been structured, it's very good in the first year, very challenging after that. And that is where I think the specifically robust financial position that we find ourselves in Swansea is something that we should be rightly proud of and rightly grateful for. Because we are lucky coming into the pandemic. We were able to come into the pandemic with a healthy balance sheet. Obviously, we were very grateful for the additional assistance during the pandemic from the UK and Welsh governments. But also, as we get hopefully to the tail end of the pandemic, our overall financing and our overall revenues remain strong as a council, which is important because we are going to have to help meet some of those challenges as we go ahead in the coming years. I also wanted to pay specific thanks to Mr. Smith for his strategy of borrowing, because obviously what we do have is a capital programme that is, I think the Chief Executive referred to it in a previous meeting, of 4 times the scale of that which we had a few years ago. That has placed not only an additional burden in terms of staff to deliver those major projects and those significantly important investments in education and in our economy, but we've done so in a very prudent and financially sensible way. And just to add to what Mr. Smith said, because of the strategy to borrow at historically low levels of interest, interest rates at the present time are at 0.1%, and given the onset of energy price inflation, wage inflation, and the other types of inflation that are hitting the economy at the moment, it is inevitable at some stage that interest rates are going to rise. Now, because of the fact that we have already borrowed close to 200 million, we had 90 million originally and then 120 million which has been borrowed. It has been borrowed and locked in at that rate for the whole of the borrowing period, which is 50 years, at between 1.91% and 1.96%. That is extremely low, as Mr. Smith said, very, very significant. And again, it's not a political point, but it is a financial point, because it's important that we understand that when we inherited debt previously, the rates at which the council was able to borrow and the administration were able to borrow at that point were much, much higher than we've been able to borrow now. So in effect, we've been able to borrow more at less cost. So to put that into numbers, the costs of the borrowing that we've taken out now will cost around £4.4 million a year, as opposed to £8.9 million under the previous rates that were borrowed at. And again, Mr. Smith has done a significantly important job with his team of getting that overall pool rate, that's the average across all of our borrowings, both historical and new, down below 4%, which has been an aim for some considerable time. So what that means for us, I mean, it would be brilliant if we could all get this sort of deal on our homes and mortgages. We have been able to get an extremely competitive rate, low cost repayments and fixed for 50 years with no risk for those going out. And I'm sure as interest rates increase, as they inevitably will in the coming years, people will see that as more and more of a very smart and very clever strategy of borrowing at the lowest possible rate. So, of course, what that allows us to do now is to build with confidence the major developments that we have already underway, but also to complete our 21st Century Schools programme, because, again, a lot of the money that we have borrowed is going as part of our contribution to those schools, and it's the biggest ever investment in schools in Swansea. And of course, it's absolutely right that we prioritise education in terms of capital investment, so the children who will go to those schools will have the best facilities they could possibly have. So again, Chair, I'm very, very pleased with the financial position. I expect as we go through Q2 and Q3, we will see again a strengthening of our financial position. That is what we have seen as a trend over recent years. And that has allowed me to make the statement tonight to allocate more money to the Recovery Fund. So this council and this administration can directly support our communities, directly support those that live in Swansea and provide better facilities for all. So, Chair, very pleased with that. I'm very happy to move. Well, I don't think I need to move it because it's a verbal update, but very happy to endorse what Mr. Smith has said this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Chris Holley. Chris?
Yep, thank you, Presiding Member. I think it was Napoleon said, I'm not sure if it was, but I think it was, he may be a good general, but is he lucky? And I think our leader has been extremely lucky. I'm not sure if in the fact that the interest rates is as they are. And, you know, to be blunt about it, you know, it's what Mr. Smith has just reported is a very, very good position to be in. You know, the fact is that we have got a huge capital reserve, and in scrutiny, when I asked him, it was around about 50 million over various headings. And it's, let's be fair, that is a remarkable position to be in. And I don't think in the history of local government, certainly in West Glamorgan and Swansea, have we ever been in this position. I know Councillor Des Thomas, the presiding member, has a greater history than I do in that, but I'm pretty sure that is the case. And this report is really good reading and listening. And I hope Mr. Smith can repeat this in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. If it was just like every other authority would be in a similar position, but it's not. They're not, are they? Anyway, I'll leave that for the leader too.
Chair, yeah, I mean, I was going to make a similar point, which is, you know, that there is a certain amount of luck always required in politics, but I have to say, I don't feel that lucky, and I'm sure members don't feel that lucky. We've had 10 years of Tory austerity, we've had Brexit, and we've had a pandemic, a once-in-a-100-year pandemic. But despite all of that, we've still achieved what has been laid out by Mr. Smith this evening. So again, yes, a little bit of luck maybe, but a lot of challenges, and I think a really good example of how, if you've got the right plans, the right ambitions, the right people, you can deliver on the promises, and that's what we've done.
Thank you, Leader. Well then, Chris, go on, I'm in a good mood tonight.
Thank you very much. No, Mr. Smith has given us a good report, but very good position. And let's be blunt about it. As I said, I think we have been very fortunate, not just in our offices and the way in which the dice has fallen for us. Well done.
Okay, thank you. We'll make a note of that. Okay. Right. That was a verbal report. On to item 11, Treasury Management Annual Report 2020-21. And again, Mr. Smith, please.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I will be briefer on this one because it repeats some of the matters that I've already raised, but it is an important report, albeit it's only for information. I always emphasise it's important because of the sheer scale of delegation you entrust into me. And thank you for the comments already raised. I'm more than happy to just get lucky now and then, so I equally keep every finger and toe crossed. In terms of the report itself, section 2.1 sets out that there was no formal borrowing in 2021, but there is very material activity since then, which I will refer to in my update. Section 2.2 achieved my self-imposed target of getting that pool rate down below 4%, and my immense thanks to Jeff Dong and the Treasury Management team for assisting me in being able to achieve that. I remind that when I was appointed as the Section 151 officer, I inherited 4% MRP and a 6% pooled interest rate. We're now at 2.5% MRP and below 4% for the pooled rate itself. In terms of the report, Section 1.4 importantly emphasises that I complied with all the rules that you delegated and gave me permission to operate in within the year. Section 2 emphasises I must comply with the SIPFA code. Some authorities elsewhere have got themselves into a little bit of difficulty by being a bit too smart in some of their interpretations of the code. And hence why the Treasury Management strategy is often under intense scrutiny in some areas. Section 3 summarises the debt portfolio. Section 4 summarises inflation and interest rate history and the outlook. I did sit earlier today waiting with bated breath to see what happened with the Bank of England. Nothing particularly happened today, but as the leader has indicated, I think the only way is up. Not necessarily in a good way for those that haven't got their borrowing costs away. Section 5 emphasises that in the year in question, 2021, I undertook no borrowing. Section 6 confirms I complied with the Code of Practice. Section 7 sets out the actual costs of servicing the debt in 2021, materially lower than budget, and which helped bolster those reserves. Sections 8 and 9 summarise what we did with the unashamedly cash-rich balances we had as a result of those major reserves that the Leader of the Opposition referred to being cash-backed. They only make us marginal rates of interest in the short term, but again, every little helps, to coin a phrase. Section 10, no activity in the year in terms of the private sector loans that I inherited from my predecessors. Section 11, as has been indicated and referenced already, a reminder, we borrowed £90 million quite a while back before that premium came in, and we had ultimately a target of around the £200 million to get away. That has now all been done for general fund and schools. There will still be borrowing for the HRA, but that's more fundamentally underpinned by future rents, and there will be some around the school's mutual investment model. Sections 11.2 and 11.5 emphasise I have taken the opportunity to borrow as cheap as possible for as long as possible. You can't really go much beyond 50 years in terms of the link to 50-year gilts. Section 11.6 emphasises it was the cheapest this council has ever achieved, and in section 11.7 confirms I'm below my 4% target. The Appendix 1 indicates that the capital programme, we outturned at over £200 million in 2021. We have a very material capital programme again. The cost of financing was lower than budgeted. We're well within the authorised limit for our external debt, even after all that postscript borrowing. The maturity structure is very, very long. Several more treasurers after me should be able to sleep soundly in their bed, not having to worry about where interest rates are going. So we are not exposed on any short-term movements. And the Appendix 3 emphasises that we are incredibly cash rich in the short run, which is very helpful for bolstering our position and shows where I've parked the money effectively with a number of safe institutions, albeit that's a temporary parking of funds because, as has been referenced, the recovery fund is being significantly spent and we do expect substantial sums to be drawn down from reserves. So as I say, Presiding Member, it's a for information report only, but the sheer scale of what's in there is important that you try to understand at my attempt to put it into layperson's terms. and I am incredibly pleased with what we've achieved through the last year and what we will be updating when we do the formality of the 21-22. The scale of the operations we've done in the last 6 months has been so material, it was appropriate for me to refer to them. So again, I'll pause at that point in case there are any technical questions of me, but it is an information-only report once again. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you, Ben. Technical questions then to the Section 151 officer. I've got Councillor Will Thomas. Will.
Thanks, Presiding Member. Yeah, just a question on when we take advantage of these lower rates and we pay off some of our long-term debt. I'm wondering if there's some kind of early repayment, I'm guessing, because it's not all the debt, I'm guessing, that we're rolling over. Some of it is gets to a point where you think this makes mathematical sense for me to make the early repayment on that and take advantage of the lower interest rate. I'm guessing that's what you do, but that's part of the question. And secondly, how is that early repayment then? Is it rolled into the overall debt, or do we pay that out directly? And my second point is, although I agree with what you're saying about the only way is up for interest rates, I appreciate and understand your point, but I think it's a bit misleading, because if we do see a turn down in the economy, we could quite easily see the complete opposite and go negative interest rates. I do think that is a very big possibility, although not probable. It is possible. So I'd like everyone to be mindful of that possibility as well, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, in terms of the points you make, yes, effectively those commercial loans would, if they were tried to be settled, would have a cost of settling them early, and it is simply not attractive with the historic rates as they are to actually determine to do any of those at the moment. If we did, it would most likely be that we would repay and draw down further sums from the PWLB to reimburse them. There's just been no possibility of doing it. It's just not attractive enough at the moment. In terms of your point on negative interest rates, yes, you are, of course, technically correct, and I have probably oversimplified the situation in that, of course, theoretically they could dip and we could go Japanese style, and a couple of other countries have experimented with them. Of course, the Western civilization approach has been to do the helicopter money, which is quantitative easing. And so theoretically they could. I think it extremely unlikely. I mean, you can see why the Bank of England sat on its hands today again, in the sense that whilst inflationary pressures are there all the way through to at least 2025, which means there should ordinarily be an economic response to that, they are choosing to read across because they're not convinced that interest rates directly will influence those bottleneck price pressures and such things in the meantime. And of course, all of our borrowing is maturity only. So effectively we have interest only borrowings, and that's why we do the minimum revenue provision. Effectively, it's making sure we set the money aside in the jam jar for each of the next 40 years to then be able to mature the loans in full. And in terms of the maturity profile, not only have I borrowed the new stuff long, most of the stuff I inherited was also very, very long. We've got very little in the mid-ground, and that's quite useful at the moment because gilt yields, if you look at them, are quite odd. I mean, effectively, I can get 50-year money for the same cost as anything beyond 3-year money with today's markets. But I do accept your point that theoretically they could go minus, but I am pleased you equally acknowledged, Councillor Thomas, that that is unlikely, but it is theoretically possible as a construct. So I hope I'm not proven wrong and I don't end up being unlucky on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeff Jones. Jeff?
Thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you, Ben Smith. And yes, you have done a good job at the end of the day. Definitely helped by the lower interest rates. A lot of my questions really been answered. The report actually starts with there's an unfunded capital requirement of 82 million at the end of the year 2021. I know the leaders actually mentioned the 200 million for the city deal on the schools funding. We've got a figure of a debt of 565 million. Am I assuming that the total debt will be 565 plus 82 million pound, and that no other debt is actually going to be incurred after that?
Not quite. The 82 million was the unfunded requirement at the end of 2021. I mean, clearly, as the report indicates, I have undertaken additional £120 million worth of borrowing, so that will be added to those figures. And this is at the point at which we are with the approved capital programme, which is Band B schools. It would not be unreasonable for there to be a Band C schools in due course, and there may be a number of expectations upon all councils in terms of some of the carbon neutral or carbon zero proposals still to come. So it's not an absolute that there won't be further adds to it. I mean, the questions you've raised previously are very pertinent, Councillor Jones, and as you know, having given you that postscript update of the borrowing that's been done already in 21-22, I think you'll be in a better position to know the overall position when you get the same report next year. The sheer amount I would have done in the first 6 months of this year meant it was vitally important I at least alerted you to it. So that £120 million will be added in total to the borrowing envelope. It is within what was assumed. I take you back to the advice I gave 3 years ago. To some extent, you know, the advice I gave, which was chilling at the time, was on the basis of the point at which £200 million was committed to. You had to get to the end of it, otherwise there were horrible consequences. The really pleasing part from my point of view was it was an aggressive strategy. It was a bold strategy. We have got lucky and it's paid off at doing it at cheap as chips rates. And having got to the end of the borrowing, I feel in a much safer, happier position. There is still the matter of me making sure that I make the revenue contributions to service that debt, and that will fully come out in the 22-23 budget, because obviously there's a full year effect. But as we are well aware from the reports in terms of the last couple of years' outturns, we've been significantly underspending, partly because the strategy has been to deliberately defer it till literally the last possible moment. And it looks like there's at least another month before interest rates go only one way, but it might only be a month. So I hope that helps clarify the position, Councillor Jones.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, thanks very much. That's that report was also for information. Takes us then to item 12, the amendment to the inter-authority agreement with the Wales Pension Partnership and funding and investment performance update and climate change risk update. Now, Councillor Clive Lloyd is chair of the pension committee. Is going to take this, Clive?
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member. With your permission, Presiding Member, Mr. Dong is going to take over the screen and set up a couple of slides. I am conscious of the time, so we will whisk through these, but although the main purpose of the report today is to agree the recommendation on page 181, I'm acutely aware, because I have many emails and many requests for information from members on the current state of the pension fund, particularly in respect to climate change. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to briefly update Council on progress to date, which we've touched on in the public questions, but particularly plans for the future. And I think it's really pertinent, given that we're in the 2 weeks of COP26. So I'll there's a few slides, but I'll be really brief, Presiding Member, with your indulgence. So for those of you that don't know, I'm Councillor Clive Lloyd, chair of the local government pension fund, and I have been for the last 4 years, and I've been a member of the pension fund committee since I've been a councillor going back to 2012. So my term as chair actually ends next year. I've got a couple of other responsibilities which I'm really proud and privileged to undertake. One is, this year I'm the chair of the Welsh Pension Partnership, and for those of you who are not aware, this is a pooling arrangement that was set up a number of years ago of the 8 Welsh pension funds, which have come together to basically achieve economies of scale in their investment strategies, with a prime aim of reducing costs for the pension funds that participate through reductions in fees. So we have that economies of scale with the investment houses that we deal with. The third aspect of the role that I undertake is to remind Council that pensions is not a devolved issue for the Welsh Government, and it comes under the jurisdiction of the UK Government Pensions Minister. And to assist the UK Pensions Minister, the fund, like many others in the public sector, has a scheme advisory board, and that is set up, is made up of members and employers, and they have specific tasks of providing advice and information, as I say, to the UK Pensions Minister. I fortunately sit on that, and I'm the Welsh Local Government Association representative. So, so a busy time in the pension sector for me this year with three hats on again, which I'm really proud and privileged to undertake. I'm not sure if Jeff is having problems with his with getting the slides up. Jeff, are you? But I'm not seeing them.
I'm struggling at the moment, Clive.
Yeah.
If you just please bear with. Thank you.
Shall I? I'll crack on, Jeff, anyway, and we can pick up if you get to the slides. Oh. It might be that.
Clive, do you want me to run the slideshow?
You can do, if whatever's easiest.
If I can get it going here, I might be able to get it up. Give me a second. No, Jeff's still got control, sorry.
All right, listen, I'll crack on because I say I'm conscious of time. So, so just a bit of background I was going to give. So, there's some of these terms members might be familiar with or unfamiliar, but I'll go through them everywhere. So, in terms of the local government pension scheme across the UK, the background is it's designated as a defined benefit scheme. Well, what does that mean? That means that its members are generally aware of their pension on retirement based on their average career earnings. It's a funded scheme. It's the only public sector scheme that's funded. Again, what does that mean? Well, it relies on not only contributions for its members, but an investment strategy to make up the funding of the pension scheme. Unlike many others in the public sector, all the others in the public sector, which are funded through employee contributions and direct contributions from the particular employer. There's 5.9 million members, 15,700 employers. It's got £300 billion worth of assets, and there's 95 administering authorities, of which Swansea is one. All right, Jeff.
I've got it now, Clive.
Right, if you can, next slide.
And again.
Yeah, it's not moving on my screen, though.
No. Yeah, I'll turn it off then, sorry.
All right, so in terms of the Swansea Pension Fund then, we not only administer it for our own local authority, but we also administer the pension for Neath and Port Talbot and a number of other employers in the area, such as Gower College, University of Wales, Trinity St David, Taitarian Housing Association, Neath Port Talbot College, and a number of community councils. In fact, we administer it for 26 active employers. So just a big responsibility not only for Swansea, but for other participants as well. We've got 47,000 members currently, 21,000 which are active, are still working and contributing, 15,000 which are drawing their pension, and 11,000 are deferred members. So as members that have left employment of the council but have yet to draw their pension. The average pension, you may be interested to hear, is not the gold-plated pension schemes that and amounts that are portrayed in the Daily Mail from time to time. These are the average pension in Swansea is £5,000 per annum. And some of the lowest paid people employed in the council absolutely rely on this pension for their future retirement planning. So it's a really important role that we undertake. In terms of governance of the pension fund, then that's administered by the Pension Fund Committee, as I said, which I am the chair. That has a really important role, obviously, in deciding the investment strategy of the pension fund, not least with its fiduciary duty and ensuring that we have returns on investment over the medium and long term. We're not looking for short-term gains, but we are looking for those medium and longer-term gains which can provide the sustainability of the pension fund and ensure we meet our liabilities to its members. Having said all that, we have moved in a direction where we will take into account environmental, social and governance factors in deciding where those investments should be. And I refer to that, as I say, in the public questions where we had adopted a strategy a number of years ago. As I said, going back to 2017, we adopted our responsible investment policy, one of the first pension funds in the UK to adopt such a policy, and certainly in Wales. What did that do? What did that policy do? Well, it gave a commitment that we would look to reduce our exposure to carbon-based investments by 50% by 2022, which is next year. That policy takes a holistic approach, as I outlined earlier, which is looking at all our investment institutions and the people that we deal with, and seeking to get them to reduce their exposure to fossil fuels investments and carbon-based emissions. I'm pleased to say that, as I reported earlier, that we've already hit that 50% target. So in September this year, we have reduced our carbon emissions exposure by 58%. Whilst doing that, we've looked for other green renewable investment platforms to invest in to give us that return that we think we can get. And we've committed £50 million to capital schemes for renewable energy, for green infrastructure, and we're currently carrying out due diligence for our first investments into housing, both private and social. So these alternative investments are really important, and it's important that we carry out that due diligence. So where do we go next, as we've already hit that target? The next target that the Pension Fund Committee has been working towards is getting the information and education to take us to that really next stage, and that net zero target for our pension funds, which lots of organisations are aiming for, and is very much in the headlines this week with COP26, as I said. So we're no different, and at the next Pension Fund Committee, which is the week after next, we'll be taking a report which will look to set a target for having a completely carbon net zero investment strategy by 2037. That will be debated. As I say, I don't have prejudice what the decision will be on that, but that will be debated at the Pension Fund Committee, and we will continue the good work and move towards that 2037 target, which is in line with the overall council strategy as well to hit net zero by 2050. So that's what I hope to be doing. And again, I hope that that information will be well received with the public, which I know are really keen that the pension fund is at the forefront of dealing with climate change. Again, we're one of the few pension funds that are making this commitment, and certainly one of the first in Wales, and probably one of the first in the UK. Besides that, I've talked about the fiduciary responsibility that the Pension Fund Committee has. So we have to do all this work in dealing with climate change and reducing our exposure to carbon-based investments, but ensure that we manage to deliver the liabilities to our members going forward. And I'm pleased to say that having undertaken all that action dealing with climate change, the pension fund has never been in a better position. We currently have assets of 2.6 billion, 2.7 billion as of September 21st, and that means that the pension fund, for one of the first, I think it's the first time in its history, is 103% funded. Now, what does that mean? And again, a reference to Mr. Smith referenced this, because where we've had historically a deficit where we haven't been 100% funded, that will be made up by revenue budget that Mr. Smith would have had to set aside. So the council taxpayers of Swansea would actually have to meet any deficit that the pension fund has found itself in. And we have been in that position in the past. But with that 103% funded position that we are in, that means that Mr. Smith and the council taxpayers no longer, or for the foreseeable future, have any liabilities to support the pension fund and its commitments to its members. And that's really, really important to bear in mind. So we really are meeting our fiduciary duty while doing all the environmental and social governance things as well. The fund has increased in value by 600 million in the last year alone. That's up 31% on its 2020-21 figure. It's the 8th best performing local government pension scheme in the UK. And again, as I say, all this excellent performance is being undertaken while carrying out a de-risking programme of decarbonisation. The presiding member mentioned that we've been, as a result of some of this, we've been nominated for the Local Authority Pension Fund Forum Awards for 2021. We won one a few years ago for our best climate investment strategy, and this year we've got 3 other nominations for the best pension fund greater than 2.5 billion, best climate change strategy, and best investment innovation. So a really good position, dealing with climate emergency, meeting our commitments to our members, which, as I say, is really important. I'll go on now to talk about a little bit about the Welsh pension pool, and I'll get to where the recommendations. So the Welsh Pension Partnership, as I said, was set up by and exists made up of membership from the 8 pension funds throughout the administering authorities pension funds throughout Wales, and includes Cardiff and the Vale, Clwyd Pension, Dyfed, Gwynedd, Powys, Rhondda Cynon Taf, and Torfaen Pension Fund. We've started this pooling arrangement from scratch, and there's been a number of milestones that we've undertaken, one of which is the Inter-Authority Agreement. We've set up the Joint Governance Committee, again, which I'm currently chair of. Jeff Dong and his team are part of the Officer Working Group, and currently to date we've got pooled assets of around 70% of our constituents' assets under the pooled arrangements. We've also delivered, tried to influence the Welsh Pension Partnership in terms of responsible investment, and we've adopted policies around that responsible investments and climate change. And again, the key aspect of this is to achieve economies of scale and savings. And to date, we've achieved savings of £3 million, which is not an insignificant achievement. So I come to the recommendations now. What I've tried to do in my time as vice chair of the WPP and chair this year is try to influence in terms of making governance, improving good governance in terms of how we manage things on a day-to-day basis. And one of those things for me has been about openness. Lots of information, lots of the reports that we take to the Welsh Pension Partnership and indeed the pension fund have to be in camera, where it's not always visible. And I think it's really important that members have representation where they're part of that decision-making process within that in-camera environment. So one of the things that I've been able to achieve and promote is that the Welsh Pension Pool Joint Governance Committee has scheme member representation on the committee. I have to say, not all pensions were in favour of that, and it took some negotiating and persuading. But we are at a stage now where we can put forward a recommendation where amending the Inter-Authority Agreement to allow scheme members to participate and observe what is taking place with their pension fund, because at the end of the day, it's the members' pension fund, and that's really important. So if we pass this recommendation tonight, we will put in chain of motion where that scheme member representative will be allowed to attend future meetings as an observer. There are a couple of other belts and braces aspects where we need to update the Inter-Authority Agreement. One is around allowing us to provide an allocator for private market assets. That's very technical and very complicated, but the existing agreement doesn't allow us to appoint that allocator. So this amendment will allow us to do that. And there are some minor terms of reference changes to things like officer working group, training, bringing a training plan up to date and making it more functional. So those are the main recommendations that are being put forward in the report tonight, presiding member. I'll finish there I hope that's been useful and provides a really good update on what is really an excellent performance, and I can't stress that enough. Again, meeting our environmental commitments while meeting our fiduciary duties. Finally, Chair, I would like to pay some personal thanks to my colleagues on the Pension Fund Committee. This is a really important committee. 2.6 billion dwarfs everything, in the council in terms of budget responsibility. So it's not an insignificant responsibility. And I'd like to thank my Pension Fund Committee members for their due diligence and their application in making some of these key decisions. I'd like to thank the local pension board, who are responsible for scrutinising the work of the Pension Fund Committee, particularly the Chair, Councillor Alan Lockyer, previous Chair, Ian Guy, and some of the members of the local pension board who are here as councillors tonight. I'd like to pay a huge tribute to, we've thanked Mr Smith tonight quite rightly, but the Deputy Section 151 officer, I have to pay a huge tribute to Mr Jeff Dong, whose advice and an application and guidance for me as chair is second to none. So Jeff, thank you very much. He's ably supported by Karen Cobb and Claire Elliott, and who's our pensions administration manager. Again, a huge team effort from all of those. And I'd like finally to thank our independent financial advisors, Hyman Robertson, who again have really bought into the work of the Pension Fund Committee and desire to go down this road of being the greenest and best performing pension fund that we best possibly can be. I'll leave it there, Chair, and if happy to take any questions, but I move formally the report and the recommendations on page 181.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting and impressive report. Thank you. Councillor Mike Lewis to second it, please. Mike.
Yes, I will second that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Will Thomas.
Thank you, Presiding Member. And I'd just like to echo all of Clive's points there. I think what Jeff and his team at the Pension Fund have done is absolutely incredible. To be fully funded from where we were a few years ago, it's huge praise needs to go to them. The difference that'll make to people's pensions and the council budget is really an incredible achievement. So well done to the whole team. I'd also like to thank Clive, because I know he comes under a lot of pressure and a lot of criticism from lobby groups and other people. And being a member of the committee, I know that the environmental impact of the pension fund is top of Clive's priorities, as well as obviously fully funding the pension fund. So big thanks to Clive for all your hard work, as well as being chair. So thank you.
Thank you, Will. Councillor Rob Stewart. Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very quickly, I just pay tribute to the work that Clive, the committee, and Mr. Dong have done. It's an absolutely fantastic position for the pension fund to be in, and so very different to what the position was a few years back, when there was a significant deficit in the fund. But also, of course, at the same time, making massive strides in terms of divestment from carbon-based investments. So again, an outstanding performance, and we should be very proud of the work that's been undertaken by the committee and Mr. Dong.
Thank you, Councillor Andrea Lewis.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I don't intend to prolong, but I did want to add my sincere thanks to Councillor Clive Lloyd and to the Pension Fund Committee members. How could I fail not to add my thanks with so much focus, not just on climate change, but on building more social and more affordable housing. Well done to the team. It's a fantastic effort, and an effort that all committee members, including you as chair, should be extremely proud of. So thank you very much for a very, very positive report today. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. The recommendations on page 181. Mr. Evans, take the vote, please.
Thank you, Presiding Member. The vote has been sent out to you all. I can see Councillor Walker, you want to declare verbally, so how do you vote?
For.
Okay. Councillor Peter Jones.
For, Chairman.
Any others unable to see the vote? No. Okay, I shall close the poll. And that's unanimous for, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. It's well past 7 o'clock. It's time for a comfort break, folks. 10 minutes.
Okay.
You can all go make a cup of tea. We can't have a cup of tea. I'll see you in 10 minutes.
20 past 7.
It's funny, it's frozen.
Hugh,
Yeah,
the recording's off at the moment, isn't it?
the recording is on. I mean, it's a difficult one. No one can see us. You know, we're not on live event, but yeah, hang on.